Good morning, everyone. Thank you all so much for coming out today. How many years ago did we start?
2012.
In 2012, the Johnson sisters, by another mister, approached us with the idea of carrying the Mommy Reads program, which had been initiated by Trinity Methodist Church, into the United Church of Gainesville, and to really create our own program and to run with it. And as I often am, I was a little hesitant, but of course, again, with the Johnsons, all things steamrolling, all things are possible and inspiring. So since then, this has been one of, I think, the most profound ministries of the United Church of Gainesville, where volunteers willingly go into the prison, giving mothers of all ages opportunities to connect with their families in ways that they never had before. Over the course of our time with the program, we have gone, I'm sure you'll tell us how many states and many different countries even. It's been an incredible experience. But as our volunteer population ages, as the prison, I know this shocks you, offers less and less restrictions for things like COVID, it's become challenging for us. And so today we find ourselves at a crossroads, considering how and if we advance our Mommy Reads program into the future. So the Johnsons are here to tell us more about it and open up the conversation. But thank you all for coming, for participating, and for your support, really. I know a lot of you have volunteered for many years and have been here for many years with us, supporting and doing this program. And it has been incredible, absolutely incredible. So thank you, first of all, for your service. Thank you for your vision, and let's see where we go. So thank you.
Okay, Tristan, we can go for the show, please. Awesome, thank you. I see we have some of our volunteers there via Zoom. Hello, everybody. Andy gave a good introduction, so I won't, and most of you have had the chance to look at this slideshow, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on each one. I'm not going to go through all the numbers for you. You can glance at that, but we really feel like we were able to make a pretty significant impact. I think the bullet on this slide that I would really emphasize is that for both the incarcerated women and the volunteers, this program was so much more than the numbers. I think every volunteer that we had felt like they got more out of the program than they were giving. And it just, for many, but like at Christmas time, for example, in the December visit, we would always spend, we would stay the whole day there and do double the number. And I think for many of us, that felt like Christmas hadn't started until we were there at Mommy Reads. And so I can't underestimate the impact that had on the volunteers, as well as what we were doing at the prison. And so it's really with a heavy heart that we find ourselves here today. Okay, what do I need to point at, Tristan? Yeah, I thought I did that. Oh, the gray one. Okay, here we go. Here's what we're facing right now, though, is based on limited available data. We believe the vaccination rates among the both the staff at the prison and the women at the prison is low. And I'll tell you what we do know about that, because we don't have any really hard data, but fairly early in the after vaccinations first became available, there was some published information that said that the correctional officers and the uptake of vaccinations among the correctional officers and the incarcerated women was pretty low. Of course, that was now, a couple of years ago. We also have, and Barbara Bainan could speak to this, but if I don't get this right, speak up, Barbara. But we were also went, it wasn't a UCG sponsored program, it was Journey Daybook, but was also going to the prison on almost a monthly basis. And we have contact there with somebody who is now out of prison. Actually, some of you volunteers may remember Jackie Kennedy. She also came to Mommy Reads occasionally. She's now out of prison, I think completely off the works release and all of that, and doing quite well. But she's still in contact a lot with some of the women at the prison, and has told Barbara and others that the COVID rates there are still pretty scary, and has encouraged Journey Daybook not to go back to the prison because of that. So that's the other piece of data we have. And of course, the other thing we simply know is the prison is in Marion County. It's big, Trump country, and politically, at least the predictions would be that people are more skeptical than we would find here in Gainesville. So anyway, I just wanted you to know what we're basing that on. I have contacted the prison, talked to the chaplain there, and they will allow volunteers to mask. So that's a good thing. But they wouldn't, not only would they not allow us to require masking, I said, well, could we just bring single-use masks to the prison and invite people to mask? Because we really believe that our program was so popular that I think we would have had at least a 95% compliance rate, because people wanted to be able to contact their children, and that even that we are not allowed to do. So I think the prison is just such a risk averse environment. You never get rewarded in the prison for saying yes, you only get rewarded for saying no. And so I think that's probably why they are. Kind of as a result of Bullet 2, and maybe just in general, the present Mommy Reads leadership team, which is Dottie and Becky and me, we're kind of ready to retire. I'm personally not prepared to go into the prison if we can't have masking of everybody, and or nearly everybody. And then the only other issue, just as COVID was happening, the prison had started a whole new system of background checks and all. They had always had one. At the time that we were trying to do it, it was really very messy, and people were having, I suspect they've worked out those bugs now, but just so everybody knows, people would have to undergo a background check. You have to go to the sheriff's office and get fingerprinted, and then you have to undergo an online training that's actually pretty easy. That only takes a few hours. And then of course, we also had then a Mommy Reads specific training. So there's quite a few steps to get people, ready and up to go to the prison. So, okay. And just the other thing that what we do have kind of in the bank, we always tried hard to sort of keep ahead of the game, so we wouldn't be struggling for funding, and so or materials. And so we have several large boxes of beautiful children's books right now. They're in the closet over in Seminar B. We have a couple hundred MP3 players, which would be enough for like a whole year's worth of work or more for Mommy Reads. Dottie's got a bunch of writing supplies, because we always gave the women an opportunity to write a note to their children or grandchildren. We have a mobile cart, which I bet you UCG would want to keep under any circumstances, because it's also used for other things. We have about $8,000 in the bank. And then, as you can see here, we have some really cute aprons. And so I created a few options, but this is basically the first thing we really want to talk about. Is there any momentum or whatever for resuming the program? We presently have enough dollars and supplies to run the program at previous levels for a couple of years without any further fundraising. We would need new leaders and volunteers who are willing to assume the COVID risks, and who also go through all the steps of the background checks and all that sort of thing. And then I suspect some of the prison administration has changed. And just so you're aware, the things that we take into the prison, like the MP3 players, like the recorders, even technically some of the pens that we took in, are all considered to be contraband in the prison. And if they escaped Mommy Reads at all, or the computers that we took in, so if they escaped Mommy Reads at all, that would be, the prison would go on lockdown, the whole bit. And so, you really have to have the trust of the prison administration to even be allowed to do this. And so some of the administration has changed. I suspect we may have to re-educate some of them on what we did and how we handled things, and re-earn their trust, given that we haven't been there for 3 years. But before we go on to the other options, I guess I'm curious to hear what people have to say, and I mean, are there folks here who would be willing, I guess the way Andy framed it, at this point, we're not even asking if there's folks that are willing to lead it. Are there people that would be willing to go to the prison under the circumstances, so of no masking among the people? So, okay, well, that's good to know. We need to probably get people's names and, pardon me? Okay, great. Yeah, so why don't we get people's names who are doing that?
If we go and bring single-use masks, we're not allowed the women to ask.
I think this would then come to the case of it would be, I don't know what happened if we asked forgiveness and not permission. When I specifically asked the chaplain if we could do that, he was like, no, he didn't think that would be allowed. But if we had them there and we asked people, it's possible that we could do that. Yeah, go ahead. Well, I think they can. My sense is they may mask. At one point, they were masking everybody. Now I don't know, what has happened. The question was, by the way, do they make the incarcerated women? Do they give them a choice of whether to mask or not? My sense is that that would be permitted, at least while at the program. Typically, we have done the program in the chapel, and so everybody, it's in a single location. People, in my view, could be given a mask there and then asked to surrender it when they left, if that were the problem. So anyway. Yeah, Kitty. It is in, the question is, how far away is the prison? It is in Reddick, which is about 40 minutes from here. It's virtually straight down 441. And then there's a little veer off that you go on 6 or 8 miles to get to the prison, then off of 441, not all the way to Ocala though. Well, the question was, how often do you go? In the past, we went quarterly. We ended up getting our efficiency down so that we could end up, I think, effectively using about 20 volunteers at a time. And we would then typically work with about 50 incarcerated women, or up to 50. We were prepared to do that on a given Saturday morning. We'd get there about, I don't know, 8 or 8:30, something like that. And then we would be out of there by lunchtime. So that's typically what we did. Not everybody went every time, of course. And so, but my sense is another thing that if we're able to continue the program, partly because there would probably be a lot of new volunteers, but also just because of the COVID, we might want to reduce the intensity of the program, and maybe say we're only going to work with 20 or 25 people on a given morning, at least until things got up and going again. So, any other questions? Yes, Barbara. Right. Yeah, Barbara Bainan made the point that you have to have a whole approved list of things to take into the prison, and so you'd have to, that would be the first hurdle you'd have to cross, is to say you were bringing them in, and they might very well ask why, and then that could kill the whole deal. Okay. 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 So yeah, Lindsay Taug is online and said that she has a program that she would, she's interested potentially in participating in Mommy Reads, and also another program she might like to integrate into Lowell. So. Yes. I would say, in the past, we have said no, that they had to be a member simply because we had more volunteers than we had slots. But if that ended up not being the case, then I wouldn't see any reason why that couldn't be. I guess, unless there's some insurance reason or something, Andy, but I can't. But then it was simply a matter of, like I said, we had more volunteers that wanted to go who were UCG members, and we didn't want to exclude any UCG people. Dottie,
I
yes.
think you should mention that when we would show up at the prison, we would walk in. That's what we speak to how they
Yeah, that's true. Dottie suggests that we kind of tell you the drill. Well, let me step back just a second, and let me tell you what was involved in before we went to the prison, because we did have 3 leadership people in there, and we were all fairly busy in the times leading up to the prison visits and right after. And Dottie Fabacy here was our person who got our writing materials and all of that. And we always brought stationery and cards and all that sort of stuff into the prison, so the women could write notes to their kids in addition to sending the recordings and books. And then the other big thing that Dottie did is that after we went to the prison, we would have 50 priority mail packages or whatever. And so she would go to the post office on the Monday after and then she was a real popular person at the post office. Yeah, and she would mail those packages, and so that was a big job. Becky here actually took care of all the books, and so we did. She did coordinate the annual Mommy Reads Mother's Day book drive that we did, and when we asked people from the church to bring in books, and then Becky would scrounge and look for any other places that we could find inexpensive books. We sometimes, if elementary school teachers were retiring, they would be willing to donate, some we only used new books, by the way, because we thought this might be the only gift that this mother can give their child all year. And so we wanted it to be something special. But Becky would look for other sources of books, and then if need be, supplement by Amazon or Scholastic or whatever in order to find the books. And then the other thing that Becky did was went ahead and prior to each visit would divide the books into, these are for toddlers, these are for young adults, these are for various ages, and had that all sorted so we could then, separate or spread them out when we got to the prison. And then I was really the volunteer coordinator and the liaison with the prison. And so that was trying to get everybody certified and their background checks passed and all of that kind of stuff. And then trying to keep up with the ever-changing rules of the prison. And that was so what Dottie was implying earlier was we would get to the prison and it was always white knuckle for me anyway, as to whether, were we going to get in? Were they going to hassle somebody? What rule had changed? How long was it going to take us? The whole bit. And so, and it was often a 45-minute to an hour process from the time we arrived, at least, in order till we could get into the prison. And after we got in there, everybody knew their roles, everybody knew the drill. And so then we put it together very quickly. But anyway, so there's 3 fairly big leadership jobs in order to pull this off. So yes. Yeah, you have to be 18 to do it is the minimum. Technically, men could do it, yes. And we made the decision not to include men because I think it would entirely change the dynamic of the program. Many of these women have been abused, we're in abusive relationships. And so that's an issue. I think there would probably be issues of flirting and all of that kind of stuff. And so by just having women, the real focus was on their kids and grandkids and what they could do. And so, Andy? That's true. That's true. The pickers came, yes. Well, yeah, they could, but that really wasn't an issue. Yeah, it's yeah, for sure. Yeah, yes. Sure. The question is, could this be a program that we share with another church? Sure. If somebody's willing to coordinate that, there may still be people at Trinity that would like to do it. They had an active program, but their leadership, well, I think they don't have leadership for it there anymore. And of course, COVID, they were dealing with the same issues that we were, that of their volunteers tended to be on the older side. And so anyway. Kitty. Oh, no. The question is, did the same incarcerated women come every time? And no, if we were fortunate, we would tend to get the same helpers every time. So they got to know our program, and that was good. But I think the prison tried to limit it to like once a year or whatever. And there were, I forget how many people are at the reception center right now, but about 1,200. And so when we could do 40 or 50 slots once a quarter, there was plenty of opportunity for, to get more people to come. Yes. We always had Spanish language books. And then we also fortunately had some volunteers. We always had some volunteers that were, some were quite fluent in Spanish. Some were, some of us could just get by if we needed to, but yes, we were able to do. And there were also almost always women there who were bilingual, and so they could help us if we needed it. Yes. No. The helpers were other women, incarcerated women. Yeah, and so they typically, the chaplain there has some designated chapel helpers, they call them, and sometimes they rotate around. But we were really lucky. For years and years and years, we had this one woman, and then we were all ecstatic when she actually got out or whatever, and we were able to give her a little gift to help her on her way. So that was really fun. So yeah, there was always one correctional officer there with us. And what part of what Dottie had to do when people would bring their packages up after they went through the whole process of doing the reading and recording, writing a note. The recording would then be transferred to an MP3 player, and then Dottie would check their envelopes and get them all ready to mail. But then before the envelopes could be sealed, the correctional officer in the room would have to check it and make sure there wasn't something going out that wasn't supposed to be going out or whatever. So yeah, Peggy. Yeah, okay, yeah. We also had to wear something that looked vaguely like a garage door remote opener, and that was basically a panic button, so that if something did happen, that they would call the guards in. Of course, we never had to use that and at all. I mean, but it was something they wanted us to do. So yes, go ahead. Yeah, I don't really know. Yeah. Yeah, they may not clear the background check. Yeah. So yeah, and they really go all over. Sue? Oh, yes. Yeah, and you have to go through, it's an annual process of I think re-upping the training. You don't have to go through if you're an active volunteer, I don't think you have to, at least in the past, put it this way, we didn't have to redo the background training again, or the background check, but you did have to re-up the training. Initially, for many years, the training was like, I mean, oh my gosh, it was terrible. You had to, we would go down there as a group, and you sat in this room, and I mean, and it was just awful. But now the training is online, and so you can whip through it pretty quickly. So that part is better. Yes. Yeah, we did them always. It was the first Saturday of every quarter. So we did them, but I mean that could be modified. It's whatever you can work out with the prison schedule. So we did them in March, June, September, and December. Yeah, that's very doable. Okay, Kim, great. Hi. Any other, yes.
I just wanted to comment that, regarding the background check, if you've ever worked in healthcare with certain types of loaded, had to go through that background check. There's different levels, but if that's not.
Oh, yeah, it's
It's not like a, you know, it's-
no, I think they just run you through their computer and see what they find. It's not, that part's not, then you do, but the fingerprinting was new, that we had to do this most recent round. So anyway, yes, Sue. Well, we never needed volunteers. You know, like I said, we had plenty of UCG members who were prepared to volunteer before. And so if anything, I had to, Taylor Williams a couple times did shows that sponsor or that were done mommy reads, and sometimes we would get volunteers that wanted to come up out of that, and I had to tell them, you know, we appreciate it, but we really need you to be a UCG member, because we had so many UCG people that wanted to participate. So yeah. Well, what is your name again? Okay. Did you go through the whole background stuff and all? Because I mean, okay, because I mean, anybody that was anybody that had passed the whole background and gone through the process, we certainly included, particularly at the end, because we were doing it pretty intensively. But okay, yeah, over here, Becky. Hmm. Yeah, there's some aspects of doing this program that certainly do not appeal to the typical UCG anarchist, you know. Yeah, I mean, it's here's our poster child for that right here. Yes. But I know you didn't. I know, but we had to calm her down a little sometimes. But I mean, you know, so anyway, that is, and like I said, we were allowed to take stuff into the prison that nobody else was. And so you have to be so careful to make sure that nothing is out of your sight. And what's weird, I mean, in the prison, something small, a little plastic bag that the MP3 players come in or whatever, can be currency in the prison that gets somebody something. And so, you know, you have to have people that are really hyper vigilant about that. And so anyway. Oh yeah, we had to go through the metal detectors and all that stuff. Yeah, exactly. So it's any other questions? Yes. Yeah. What's that? Yeah, sure thing. Yeah. The question is whether we have any current volunteers that are willing to carry on, or whether we would have an entirely new core of people. I mean, I know I can speak for the leadership group that we will be delighted to assist in any way we can to ease that transition. And I think, you know, we've got other volunteers. I see Carrie there nodding her head. I mean, we'll help in any way we can. I'm just not sure if people are going to actually, I don't know that we have anybody that's actually willing to go to the prison, but we may. Okay. Good. The question is, what is the weekly, monthly, whatever quarterly time commitment of being a program leader? And so I'm going to let each of you speak to what you did. You want to go first? We did it with 3, and we doing it with 3. We were pretty independent. I mean, we talked to each other and all that stuff, but we didn't have any meetings or that. So the roles were pretty well defined, and we took it from the.
Also, I mean, you have a serious skill set. I mean, this is not your normal retirement committee up there.
I think my daughter's saying her mother's a retired administrator with high control needs. The book piece of it is mine, and I start thinking about time. And really, if you're the book coordinator, it's a continuous thing. You are always on the hunt for books, and I have spreadsheets of books that we've used in the past. Before the 4 quarterly visits, you would need to be able to go into Seminar B, and they're just bins of books in there to get them sorted. And that typically several people would come in to help. So that's 4 times a year that getting the books ready, getting them sorted needs to happen. And that takes 3 to 4 hours every time. Depending on how many volunteers show up, we can cut it back a little bit. And again, and I apologize that it's hard to narrow down the amount of time that constantly looking at books, but a few hours a month probably. And I tend to really underestimate the amount of time it takes. So the book drive, yeah. Right. We keep them in the closet in Seminar B if anyone ever wants to go take a look. Right. The book sale. We did for a while do a used book sale, but that just got to be too much. But the book drive, even Carrie's absolutely right. She helped coordinate that. And that we did it, tried to time it near Mother's Day. And so you could donate a book to Mommy Reads to honor your mother. And it was very successful, I think. But the time that took to get the announcements into the newsletter, that sort of thing, and actually be there on the day to collect. To repeat it. Yeah. Okay. And thought I was, but okay.
I think it needs to be a consistent listing the amount of time pulling the books, finding the books that the moms like, having a variety of books. You have to have picture books, you have to have middle books, you have to have teen books. A lot of the moms can't read, so having simple text, complicated text, spiritual text, Spanish books. This is popular, this is not popular. We had a lot of parents that wanted SpongeBob. We didn't have any SpongeBob. I mean, it sounds like a easier job than I think it is. Like, I really think it takes the love and continuous oversight of someone that's really connected in the program. I think if you're not connected in the program, you're not going to see all those pieces to be able to get. I mean, I teach elementary school, so you think I could build a good book collection, but not like that. It's a different skill set.
Talk about the reorder.
Talk about the right. When we come back, I would have forms that we used so the women could pick out the books they chose. The reason for those forms would be, we have a real good idea of what was popular, what was wanted. But also you have to keep an inventory so you know what you've got. So you need to be a bit of an Excel person, is the way I did it, to be able to track those books. Any other questions on that or? Yep.
Well, I can't believe that we did it all those years. It was a great, it was a great program. I did shopping for note cards and papers, but a lot of church folks would donate. So, you know, when you used to get those cards in the mail, those cards, such as the nature ones with the animals, those were so popular. Those were the most popular. I remember I used to go to Michael's a lot because they had a lot of note cards, and no envelopes. They could not, we had to just toss the envelopes because it was the note card would go in the package, but no envelopes. They couldn't send a sealed note because the officers would read the notes that the moms were writing, you know. I mean, it was this prison, you know, definitely a prison. And we had writing tables set up where we had the paper supplies and the pens, and we had to count pens. We had to count the pens, and then they would go off with the person, our volunteers, to do the recording and come back to me, and I would be at the mailing table. I was the last stop. I really liked that stop too, because the moms were finished with the whole process, and many were very emotional, as you can imagine, right? They're finally getting to send their child or grandchild, and some nieces and nephews. It was all different family dynamics. My biggest thing was the shopping didn't take a lot of time, because that would be like, if I happened to be out and see something, I'd pick it up. But the big thing was Monday morning, going to the post office. Someone mentioned hauling all the books and everything. Well, that was when we arrived, they were in bins. When we left, they were in packages. We had them in their mailing packages. Well, yes, I would use shopping bags. And I would make several trips into the post office because it was too much to have them all at once. And plus, as I said, people behind me were not happy. But that was my biggest chunk of time, was probably, you know, it could easily be up to 3 hours, 2 to 3 hours. That was a big chunk of time. I think you have something else? Post office. I think, did we finally go to priority mail? Oh, I have some packages right here to show. It's just regular packages like this. Yeah. You have something else? I did.
Pretty much, yeah.
Good. That's a good point. So the point was made that if you're on the leadership team, you would go each time. We could make arrangements if Karen decided to travel the world or that sort of thing. We could occasionally not go, but we really tried to make the point that each of us went each time. The other thing I forgot to mention when I started thinking about books, do you know how many banned books might be in that collection? And would they go through the governor's list when you got to I have no idea. Yeah, that was my 2 a.m. thought.
We also just had to use some judgment on books. I remember one time somebody donated the Junie B. Jones book, I Am Not a Crook. And so we had to like take that out, you know. So, it's not the kind of thing we put in the program. I like I said, was the volunteer coordinator. And so the initial big part of that was just getting people through the background stuff. I would keep track of, you know, who had passed the background training, who had been through the Little Mommy Reads training that we did. The prison typically did the training, in-person training at that time, 3 or 4 times a year. So who had been through, who needed to go through, so they wouldn't get stopped at the gate when we got there. So, and then inevitably there were hangups. And so then I would, help somebody get through the process or whatever. So that was part of it. Then the other part of what I did is we had different, I didn't explain this before, but we had different skill sets required among the volunteers. And so typically, like I said, we did this in the chapel. And so typically, then there's a bunch of pews in the chapel. So we would have two people that were had some familiarity with children's books, and often that was if we had somebody, an elementary education teacher or something. But they would spread out the books among the front pews, and then they would help moms, and the moms we would just have them come in like in groups of 5 or 6 or something, but they would typically help the moms pick out books for their children, because as I said, some of them the moms are not terribly literate, or they just say, oh, my kid really likes Minecraft, so do you have any books along those lines or whatever. And so we would try to help them do that. And then we had a writing table that then would, and there would typically be about 2 people working the writing table. And again, that really required more monitoring than you would think. Sometimes, occasionally, we would have to write notes for people, but more than that, it required monitoring, because people would try to take a lot more stationery and sneak it out. Or like I said, we had to really monitor the pens, because for a while we were only allowed to bring in these gel pens that were really horrible to write with. They were because they didn't want pens that could be turned into weapons. And so anyway, so we had a couple of people working the writing table. We would have probably at least half a dozen people that were doing the recording, and because we had like 10 handheld recorders, and those people would be one-on-one with an incarcerated woman, kind of have to set her at ease, because they were often very nervous about reading and the whole bit. And so to set her at ease, they would then go do the reading with them. And then we typically had 3 or 4 people that were operating laptop computers, and they would actually then transfer from these handheld recorders, which were fairly high quality recorders, and then they would then transfer them to little MP3 players like this, and then they got a pretty decent quality recording. This also has little earbuds with it, and then the people on the computers would then allow, and this was always a special moment, but would allow the mom to hear her voice, and so she would know that what her child was going to hear. And then after they didn't necessarily do everything exactly in that order, but after they went through all those phases, then they were ready, and they went up to Dottie, who would then check their packages, and then the guard would check the package, and then it would be sealed. And then the last thing we did is we had Linda Everett, and then Joanne Pullman was going to help us with this, but we had a couple of UCGers that had really nice handwriting, and then we gave each woman a card that said something like, giving your child or grandchild the gift of reading is a wonderful gift, or something. It was said better than that, but that was the gist of it. So they had that then to take away. But again, even Dottie didn't even mention this, but we had to be very careful. We couldn't have cards that had glitter on them. We couldn't have any books that had any mechanical parts at all. I mean, there's all kinds of these little rules, some of which we found out the hard way. And I'm trying to think, Carrie, were you going to say something? Yeah, something like that. Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's see. We would, how many, there were 6, 8, 10, 12. There were always at least, well, let's see, 4, 10, always about 15 or 16 volunteer slots. That doesn't include me, and it often doesn't include Becky, because we would often just be, checking things out and, talking to the guards or whatever. Sometimes if we had enough people, we would actually have kind of an expediter, a traffic coordinator telling the women where to go. And that was also helpful. So we could easily use 17 to 20 if people knew what they were doing. And then the other thing, but you could get by with less than that. The other thing, though, is that I also told the people, all our volunteers, if you have the time, just, you know, if you had enough volunteers, you could stop and talk to people, and just sitting down with someone who was waiting to do it, and giving them the gift of giving them attention for 5 or 10 minutes and letting them talk about their child or whatever was on their mind. That was, I think, another part of the gift that we gave. So.
Your position, I think with your position, we'd get to the prison and we didn't necessarily have the same rooms that we could count on, or something was up. And so you were really masterful at keeping the flow. You're like an industrial engineer or something. And so it was just moving, and you were able to do it in shift spaces. So a person, we need, you know, someone needs to be aware that's part of it, is quick thinking, because things in the prison change all the time. When you walk in, it may not be like they had.
Yeah, and I considered a major part of my job to be schmoozing the guards, schmoozing the chaplain, and impressing upon anybody who would hear me about how seriously we took this contraband stuff. I mean, you know, it was kind of disgusting, really, but that, you know, that's the language they understand. Yes. Yes, yes. And after we had the system down, we actually just the contact was with the chaplain. Another thing that I did, and this was always another white knuckle time, but we, you know, at least a week or 10 days, sometimes longer, it depends on what they wanted. Before we left, I would have to send them the list of all the volunteers and also all of the materials that we expected to be bringing to the prison. And then that would go through some process on their end. And then the theory is that then when we arrived on Saturday morning, that would be there at the front gate, and they would already have that. The theory worked maybe, I don't know, half of the time. Sometimes they would have to go track it down, and, you know, the whole bit, that would be a total shock to them that we had shown up. But we always got in. We never got turned away. So yeah, we just did 4 times a year. I mean, certainly they would probably be open to doing it more if people wanted, but that seemed to work for us.
We did after we were finished, when we would sit outside and eat our lunch.
Yeah, that's true. They do have some picnic tables outside the prison, and so oftentimes we would sit out there. People would bring their lunch, and we would sit out there and decompress together a little bit. And for me, that was also a really important part. If somebody had something really special or really emotional that happened, you know, they could talk about. We would share with that a little bit, and just give yourself a little space before you got in the car again to go home, because that was. Yeah, it was a really good time. And by the way, I mean, I didn't bring it today because of this, but I have, if somebody is really interested in taking on the leadership of this, I have a couple of videos that before they said we couldn't take a camera in there anymore. I have videos that are kind of testimonials of what this meant to the women. And, you know, some other things that we used in fundraising, and also could certainly be used to help solicit volunteers. So we do have some materials like that. Sue? We had a group of probably about almost 30 people, give or take, that were approved volunteers, somewhere between 25 and 30. It varied, and so then what I would do is, you know, a month, 6 weeks, maybe 2 months before the visit, would say, okay, here's the visit, can you come? And inevitably, you know, half a dozen people say, oh, gee whiz, I know I can't go that day. So then I would take the remaining people, and as we got able to do more and more people, like I said, we were up to doing about 50 on a given Saturday morning. We could really use almost all the volunteers that we could get. But again, if you didn't have that many volunteers, we could efficiently use 20 volunteers, put it that way. If you weren't doing working with 50 incarcerated women, you could certainly scale back the number of volunteers you needed. Yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't have an answer to that, but most of them are in their 60s and 70s, and so I wouldn't necessarily count on a lot of people being willing to go, at least at the present rates of COVID. we could certainly, I mean, we certainly ask that and find that out. I mean, we actually have a Gmail account that Gmail, that's Mommy Reads, that I have, everybody whose backgrounds was approved at the time and other potential volunteers and that kind of stuff in it. So, and and I know Becky has spreadsheets. I have spreadsheets going back to what volunteers like to do what and all that, because not everybody was comfortable doing the computer part or the recording part. And so, but anyway, yes. They don't have access to the internet. The question is, could the recordings be uploaded to Dropbox or whatever, something like that? The incarcerated women don't have access to the internet. And in fact, if you went into the prison, you were not allowed to wear a Fitbit or any kind of watch or anything like that that might be able to transmit information. Well, many times, well, we were there. Most of the time we would, I'm trying to help me out here, but we would go through an electronic thing, and then they would also, you'd have to take off your shoes, and then they would also pat you down. And yeah, and then we had some people that maybe had a hip replacement or something, and they would just kind of tell them that, and yes. Right. Yeah, they're not. I think that the Liz is saying that they have incarcerated folks now. Almost everybody has a tablet, and as a matter of fact, in the Florida prison system, you can no longer send people mail. And if you do send somebody a card, so it's really sad. I mean, somebody can't get a picture that their kid colored or whatever. And if you do send them mail, then it is scanned somewhere in Tampa, and then it's sent to their tablet. And that's how they see it or whatever. And so, but all of that goes through the vendor in Tampa, and there's no internet access. So. Yeah, it's yeah, I mean, there's so many things that they could do that would just make it so much, and they seem like small things to us, but that's just not, that's not where their heads are. I mean, like I said, they could make it easy for us to volunteer with this program, and they don't. So anyway, yes, Sue. Oh, okay, thank you, Tristan. Yeah, let's see. And we can stay afterwards and talk if you've got more questions, but Becky, yes.
One thing to consider too, and when we talk about working with the prison, since the onset of the pandemic, their numbers of correctional officers have dropped to dangerously low levels. So I suspect there wouldn't be any room for us asking them to take one extra step, because it takes everything they've got just to open the doors.
Right. Okay. Well, why don't we shut it down? We're happy to stay afterwards and talk some more. I'm excited that there's appears to be some interest in in potentially keeping this going. And so let's talk for a bit about what the next steps might be or whatever. And happily, I didn't have to get to the rest of my slideshow about dispersing the assets, because that's not what we're talking about. So that's good. So Peggy, yes.
I think it would be great